Hello Research Methods B students, John Monroe here. As you can see along the canal, there's the cube. You could probably locate where I am. It's morning time, I'm making my way to campus. And as I'm riding in, I thought I would say a little bit about picking your dissertation topic, as you're now doing in Research Methods B, and a little bit about the kind of US or North American sort of pathway in terms of personnel and topics for your dissertations. So I'm recording this, I guess it's kind of a lecture, some comments is maybe a better way of putting it. I'm recording this because, of course, as you know, I didn't deliver the lecture in class for you, and I'm sure you know why, because I was out on strike. And I just want to say that I appreciate the difficulty that this causes for students, the disruption that it is to your learning. You know that we're out here when we're on strike, defending our pensions, which are being drastically cut. It's International Women's Day today, so particularly apt. One of the struggles is about the gender pay gap and other related issues, precarity and so on. And I encourage you, as I do with all of my students, to get a kind of range of views. This is a really important issue, and obviously it's having a big effect on you as well as on staff. So use your skills as historians and history students to critically evaluate all the information you hear from all sides. I, like everyone else in this conversation, have a position and an opinion, and you can weigh that for what it's worth, and you can weigh it against others. So just wanted to say a little bit about the context for why you're getting this lecture, such as it is, by video rather than in person. Okay, so what I want to do in terms of content here is say a little bit about, I'll start by giving some general tips. So these comments will maybe be of interest to students who are thinking about a topic in US history, or Canadian history for that matter. But I also want to make some general comments that might be of use or maybe some interest to all of the students in Research Methods B as well. So here's a few general tips in terms of thinking about arriving at your dissertation topic. So the first I'd say is, and I'll give you a few of these straight off, gather some resources, some general resources as you're thinking about it. And some of you, of course, I know will already be quite far along in this process, but nonetheless, gathering resources. So I'll link a couple right below this video. And they're things that I've been involved with, so they come readily to mind. So one, there's a kind of public syllabus. It's called the Imperialism Syllabus. It's something I've been involved in. Good morning. And it pertains to the huge topic of imperialism, which of course connects to many other topics. So many of you, in different ways, might be working on a topic that's related to imperialism. And as you'll see on the syllabus that I'll link for you, there's a variety of kind of weeks of the syllabus, and they have different themes, and you can look there and you can get a quick overview of that theme and see some reading. So that could be something of use. Secondly, I will also link, and this is a good resource, is thinking about other people who have done this. I was trying to think about how this might work, and I'm just gonna pass someone here. It's coming up on your right. Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, so I had the great good fortune of being able to have a conversation, an interview with Tian Paris, who is a postgraduate student at the University of Hertfordshire. And so she's, at a different stage. She's further along than you in terms of being a postgraduate student. But I had a really interesting conversation with her about her work in US history, Black women's history, and at an early stage of how she's conceptualizing the project that she's working on. So that might be of interest just to have a look at that. And third, a resource you already know, and you'll be really sick of my voice if you check that one out too, but remember from last semester, the 5 key concepts in American studies recorded lecture that I provided, which gives you, these key ideas: base and superstructure, racial capitalism, intersectionality, settler colonialism, and relationality. And these are all key kind of concepts that you can really work with in your dissertation. And they connect to one of the other kind of tips that I want to give you. So here's a few, so those are some resources. That's the first place to start. Secondly, this is obvious, but it's worth thinking about. Finding something that you're interested in. And that can be easier said than done. And I find that a few ways to kind of approach this. One is to ask yourself, out of everything I've read so far at the University of Birmingham, what single reading did I find the most interesting? What gripped me? What called my attention? What did I find myself really turning the pages or scrolling down the screen on? And that'll tell you something about where your interests might lie and what kind of topics you might want to pursue. Talk to other people. Talk to your members of your family. Say, I'm thinking about doing a topic in U.S. history, and I'm not sure what to do. What do you know about U.S. history? When you think of the United States, what do you think of? What's interesting? See what your parents say, perhaps, or other friends. So have a general kind of conversation with people can also, having that kind of conversation can be useful as well. Popular culture, of course. Current events. It won't surprise me if some of you want to take up a topic that has something to do with the climate crisis. And of course, there are many, the ongoing relevance of economic inequality, racism, patriarchy, again, it being International Women's Day, it's extra appropriate to be thinking about that. So there's a number of different kind of topics out of the news that might be calling your attention. You can think about those and think, oh, how does that relate to maybe something I might want to do for my dissertation? Okay, so something that's of interest. Also key, think about, now as you start to kind of develop past that point, okay, so you're interested in a few things. You want to think about something in which there's a debate, potentially. Something in which there are numerous kind of ways that you can think about a topic. So here's where those 5 key concepts might come in terms of, let's say, is Bayesian superstructure an appropriate theoretical model for looking at topic X? Or maybe is intersectionality a better one, etc. So there's ways that those concepts can help you to think about debates. And then there's also, kind of just straightforward historical debate about any number of topics. If we think about the history of racial slavery, was that primarily an economic system? Was it primarily a racial system? Obviously, it's some kind of combination of the two, but there's a lot to say about how you would combine those two elements. For instance, the ways in which racial slavery was, of course, also a gendered system, and so on. Think about in 1945, the then new president, Harry Truman, decided to drop 2 atomic bombs, one on the city of Hiroshima and one on the city of Nagasaki, which kind of were the sort of ending points in some ways of World War II. Why did that happen? Why did they do that? There's huge debates about this. Did they do it to save the lives of US soldiers that might have been lost in a land invasion? Did they do it to save the lives of Japanese civilians whose lives might have been lost in a land invasion? Did they do it for reasons of racism? Did they do it to intimidate the Soviet Union? Did they do it as revenge for Pearl Harbor? So there's, key historical events have many interpretations, and so you want to think about the different debates that might surround a topic that you might choose. Also, you want to think of something that that you can demonstrate, basically. You might want to think about sources here, right? So if you've got a topic that you're interested in, and then if you've got a sense of the debates around it, you can then think about what's been written about it. But then you also want to think about, beyond the historiography, obviously the question of sources. So can you demonstrate this? And if so, how? And obviously, we're in England. There's a limited number of primary resources that you're going to be able to have access to. Of course, no one's expecting you to go to the United States to go to an archive. That said, there's lots of ways in which you can access digitized material. You can request things from archives and libraries in the United States. Don't spend huge money on this, of course. one of the things that our whole strike situation raises is the question of where does all this money go that you're spending on this university education. So we're well aware of that. We don't expect you to go into debt over this, but there's ways in which very inexpensive or perhaps free resources exist. And of course, the first sort of point of contact for this is our own library, asking the great staff there. Okay, coming up on the right. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
So yeah, just speaking with the with our great staff in the University of Birmingham Library is another excellent starting place in terms of thinking about sources, thinking about what you might have access to. Obviously, newspaper sources can be a key kind of primary source, as well as archival materials. And we also have a number of resources. I'll put a few links to some of that stuff as well. Okay, well, as you can see, have a look, I'm almost at campus, if you can hear me over the train. So what I'll do is I'll end this part of the video here, and then I'll pick this up back in my office with just a few more comments about some of the staff that you might want to talk to in terms of developing your topic. Okay, more in a second. Okay, hi everybody. I'm back at my desk now, and just wanted to make a few more comments about the Americas stream in history at the University of Birmingham, and add a few further things you might want to think about if you're thinking about writing a dissertation in this area. So the Americas is a broad field. Our expertise is concentrated in the United States, but we have colleagues on staff doing excellent work in Canadian and Latin American history as well. We also think of American history as transnational history and not limited to North and South America also. So we have several members of staff you can speak to in terms of the topics that you might be considering and working on. There's me, first of all. I work on mostly post World War II topics. I've written about the African-American freedom struggle in the context of global decolonization. I have a growing interest in how the politics of mobility and public space are reflective of relations of power. But in addition to me, there's also some really insightful and interesting historians who I'm really lucky to work with and who you can contact. So Courtney Campbell is a Latin Americanist. She works on the cultural and social history of Brazil. She's written about film, about social movements, race, and gender, and she just completed a book entitled Region Out of Place, which focuses on northeastern Brazil in order to consider the relationship between region, nation, and transnational history across the 20th century. So Dr. Campbell is somebody who you could talk to if you're interested in this very idea of region, which many of you might be thinking about, maybe in the Brazilian context, but also she'd be someone to think about if you're thinking about region as a kind of concept to work with more broadly. Steve Hewitt is a historian of both US and Canadian history. He works on terrorism and counterterrorism, political extremist movements, surveillance, spies, police, many topics. If you want to understand any manner of topics from 9/11 and the US response to it, to much more recently why so-called truckers recently occupied the Canadian capital city of Ottawa, Dr. Hewitt is the person to talk to. Tom Cutterum works on the era of colonial, revolutionary, and early national periods. So he works on kind of quite a long, his focus is particularly on the revolutionary era, but he has broad expertise in the entirety of what's called the colonial period. So the early 1600s all the way through to the end of the 17th century. He also is an expert in the history of the U.S. West. I'm sure some of you have taken his module on the U.S. West, and the history of capitalism. He's also an expert in that. So his work is also really transnational in terms of thinking about intellectual history, intellectual histories of capitalism, economic history within the United States, but very much in an Atlantic and even broader kind of geographical frame. Nathan Carden works on the era of the U.S. Civil War, so he kind of picks up in a way the period after, a ways after what Dr. Cutteram works on. So Nathan Carden works on the era of the U.S. Civil War through to the World War I period. And his work looks at culture, empire, and the politics of mobility. Nathan's doing some fascinating work on race and the history of cycling in the United States as well, that might be of interest. So he's a real cyclist, unlike me, who, as you can see, just kind of like wobbles and films myself as I'm riding a bike. But he also researches cycling in particular, which may be of interest. Michelle Cressfield's research is also concentrated in the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. So she works in a similar area to Dr. Carden, but with a thematic focus on race, feminism, and the history of science. Dr. Cressfield's written about everything from racial formation in Appalachia to Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion to Stuart Hall and DNA testing. But very important for you to take note of, Dr. Cressfield is actually on leave this term, so don't contact her right now, but know that she'll be back in the fall of the next academic year and will be supervising undergraduate dissertations next year. So there's also a range of sources you can use to get started, as I'm sure by this point many of you will have. I mentioned that imperialism syllabus that I put together with Dr. Radhika Natarajan at Reed College. She's a historian of the British Empire. But well beyond that, our library has a range of academic journals. Some, such as the American Historical Review or Past and Present, cover kind of a broad range of topics across multiple fields. But then, of course, we also have more specialized journals. The William and Mary Quarterly, for example, looks at earlier periods of U.S. history. The Journal of History of the History of Sexuality is obviously thematically more kind of specific journal. Journals like Diplomatic History look at a specific kind of history. But you'll also often find that in these specialized journals, the topic might sound a little bit specialized, but actually the kinds of questions, Diplomatic History is a great example. Diplomatic History sounds like a kind of maybe almost a niche topic in terms of diplomats and their correspondence, but actually race, gender, capitalism, these are all really important themes in the history, in the diplomatic history field. So there's a number of ways in which some of the specialized journals will also really be dealing with the big questions that the kind of more broad-based journals are looking at as well. So at the library here at the University of Birmingham, we also have several databases, such as the African American Newspaper Series, the Archives of Sexuality and Gender, and Screen Studies, just to name a few examples. So the thing to do here, of course, is to see library staff about this. Approach them, tell them what you're interested in, tell them you're trying to figure out a topic, and see what kind of sources they might be able to point you towards. So figuring out a dissertation, it's not an easy task. It might feel a bit daunting at this stage of the game, but don't get too stressed out. It's useful to remember that everybody in the module is in the same boat. You all need to figure this out, and everybody gets there in the end. So that's it for me. Apologies again for missing the chance to see you in person, which I wish had been the case. And I'll just say again, I recommend that, again, it's so important, the stuff about the industrial action, and I recommend you seek out a range of views on the ongoing industrial action, what it means for you, what it means for public education. I know I'm not the only one who sees kind of staff and students on the same side in this dispute, but see what other people have to say about it as well. I'm happy to speak with students more about it if you like. We appreciate the support too. We've had, some supportive comments from some of the students, and that's really, really great as we're kind of working through this dispute. So a happy International Women's Day to you all. I wish you the best of luck as you devise and hone your topics. And speaking for myself and my colleagues, we look forward to working with you on these dissertation projects in the coming academic year. Okay, see you later.